Hiya, folks. So, as I said in the email that I sent out earlier today, or I guess technically yesterday now, I wanted to make a video to sort of demo for you a presentation to give you some guidance towards how you might conduct your own on Monday. So, I put together a PowerPoint that I will do a dry run through basically. And present on it. This is based off of a paper that I actually wrote a few years ago, and it's just something to share with you to give you a little bit more idea of how to format your presentation and how to do it through Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. So there's a couple of ways to share your PowerPoint if you're doing PowerPoint. One way is to share files on the chat bar, which we tried to use on Wednesday for our peer response session, with kind of poor results because I guess you can only share images, PowerPoints, and PDFs. So if you're using PowerPoint, once you're in your group and you have the ability to share content, you might click on the Share Files tab, upload your PowerPoint, and then share it in the space of Blackboard. But I think by far the easier option, and especially if you're using Google Slides as opposed to PowerPoint, I don't think Google Slides you can upload. So all you have to do is go into your chat bar, and again, you can only do this, I think, when you are in your groups. But what you can do is do exactly what I'm doing now, which is share your screen. So all you have to do when you're in your groups, you go over to your chat bar here. See, this is where you put the messages in for the group chat or what have you. All you have to do is go to share content, and you'll see this share application screen. You click on it, and then your screen will do exactly what mine is doing right now, which is making itself available for your group to see. Only your group will be seeing this, but nonetheless, I would urge you to take great caution so as not to have any embarrassing or otherwise implicating photos open on your computer, no messages or no ongoing chats or anything like that that you wish to remain private, no documents open in the background, no tabs open that you don't want anybody to see for the reasons. But just be very aware of that, because it takes a slip of the finger and then everybody can see your dirty undies, as it were, figuratively speaking, but maybe literally too, I don't know. But at any rate, just make sure that there's nothing embarrassing or private anywhere open on your computer. Just make sure that's all closed up. And then you can share your screen, and then all you have to do is what I would recommend is having your file already open and just minimized when you come into the session. So all you have to do is just share your application screen like that, and then go down and open your file. And here is mine. And so here we go. My paper is called Textual Carnival, Chaucer and the Negation of Narration in the Canterbury Tales. So this is just my title card. I found this picture that took me all of about 30 seconds to find online. I just copied and pasted it. There you go. Bada boom, bada bing. Again, you can make these as fancy or as simple as you like. If you have ambitions in design or something like that, or you're just feeling creative and you want to have fun with it, which I strongly encourage you to do, then by all means do that. But I also don't want this to be a distraction from writing the paper itself, nor do I want it to distract you from doing other classwork that might be more essential. But it's definitely worth doing this. Presenting on papers, presenting on your research is something you'll have to do at various points throughout your academic career. And for a lot of you, and careers beyond the classroom. So it's just good practice to know how to do this, to discuss the work you're doing from a different perspective than from inside the work itself. So again, these should be about 5 to 10 minutes, and I sort of have a tendency to run over 10 minutes. So I'm actually setting a timer, which you might want to do. If you're worried about going over 10 minutes, then you should set a timer for 10 minutes. If you're worried about having trouble making 5 minutes, then you should set a timer for 5 minutes, so when you've met that mark. I generally have more trouble staying under a certain level. So I'm doing a 10-minute timer starting now. There you go. Textual Carnival, Chaucer and the Negation of Narration in the Canterbury Tales. That's a blank slide I inadvertently inserted. But here is my introduction. You can see that I've written out a couple of sentences rather than just doing a bullet point here. Feel free to just do bullet points if you wish, and then you can elaborate it vocally when you deliver your presentation. But for this slide, at any rate, I've chosen to just write it out. It's an otherwise sparse slide, very plain. I didn't put a picture on this one. I didn't do any animations, but you are certainly free to do pictures, animations, whatever you want to put on there to make it fun and engaging for yourself and for your audience. My paper presents a carnivalesque reading of Chaucer's seminal medieval text, The Canterbury Tales. Drawing heavily on the theory of Mikhail Bakhtin, who was a famous Russian literary theorist, I was interested not only in the sometimes carnivalesque subject matter of the individual tales, which have been commented on a little bit here and there by other writers, other critics of the works, but I wanted to go beyond the simple subject because I was also interested in how the construction and sequencing of the tales within the frame narrative of the pilgrimage are organized according to a carnivalesque dynamic. So if you've read the Canterbury Tales or have even passing familiarity with it, you'll know that the basic structure of the Canterbury Tales is a group of medieval pilgrims are setting out from an inn to go visit the shrine of Thomas Becket, and to entertain themselves on the pilgrimage, they play a game of telling each other stories, and then at the end of it, as Harry Bailey will pick the best story, and that person that tells the best story will basically be wined and dined at the end. They never get there, though, because Chaucer never finished. So my methodology was I used books and scholarly articles. I found these things in the Brooklyn College Library and the Brooklyn College Library database. I was interested in doing a close reading of the tales, but supplementing that with criticism and theory about the Canterbury Tales themselves, but also about carnival, the idea of carnival, the practice of carnival, especially carnival in medieval times. So these were some important sources that I used. Marshall Leicester's The Disenchanted Self, representing the subject in the Canterbury Tales. This was a book I leaned very heavily on for crafting my own ideas. Canterbury Tales. Heather Mastrey's Carnival Laughter and the Partner's Tale. So that's looking at one individual tale. And some of the, like I said, there's been commentary on the carnivalesque subject matter of the tales, but I kind of wanted to go beyond that and see how the notion of carnival didn't just inform the subject matter, but was actually an organizing principle of the structure of collectively and individually. The Bakhtin Reader, this was another book I leaned very heavily on, pretty much almost to the point of this being a primary source. Bakhtin doesn't really comment about the Canterbury Tales, but he talks a lot about carnival. and Carnival and Literature. His big book where he talks about Carnival mostly is a book called Rabelais and His World, about a French writer who was a little bit after Chaucer. He also wrote some about Dostoevsky and Carnival, and he's the one that kind of introduced the whole line of what might be called Carnival theory, and how the sort of philosophy and mindset of medieval Carnival informs certain literary works. And this one, Queering Harry Bailey by Tyson Pugh, is also an important one. And again, it's kind of more individual. But the thing that I found interesting about it is that Bailey features most prominently in the space in between the tales. So I thought this would be helpful in kind of looking at the tales more collectively. And as you can see, this talks about gendered Carnival, but it's playing with the ideas of Carnival, of Bakhtinian theory, and actually applying it to the Canterbury Tales. So that was a helpful seed to kind of build on. My objectives were a Carnivalesque reading of the Canterbury Tales. I bet it's a Carnivalesque text and that it could be read and explained as such. Again, I was interested in not just the subject matter, but the dynamic of the tales collectively, how they operated in relation to each other as kind of as figures or entities within a carnival. So I set out sort of looking at the tales themselves as kind of entities. I was interested in the breakdown of artistic hierarchies. So one of the tenets of Carnival is, just to simplify it, is just kind of the idea of the king is a pauper for a day and the pauper is a king. So social rankings are sort of turned inside out. If any of you have seen the Disney picture, if you have no other reference, the Disney movie, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, that version of it, the Feast of Fools, is kind of an example, actually, of medieval Carnival. That's, of course, based on a book by Victor Hugo that, explores that a little bit more seriously. But that's just a good direct example of it, actually. So you get that topsy-turvy day, that sort of thing. That's pretty, that's a nice simplified example of medieval Carnival. But there's a lot more scatological elements and, shall we say, elements too graphic for the Disney universe. But the breakdown of social hierarchies is an important element of Carnival, and I wanted to see how artistic hierarchies of genre, especially, were shifted and turned inside out in the Canterbury Tales. I was interested in the Carnivalesque as a means of exploring the very nature of storytelling. How is storytelling itself analogous to Carnival? And I was also interested in a simultaneous expansion and narrowing of Carnivalesque theory. So Carnivalesque, the term Carnivalesque, I felt in starting out with this, is applied a little bit too loosely, and I wanted to kind of rein in and better define the notion of Carnival and keep it rooted only in certain works, because if something is applicable to everything, it essentially means nothing. But I also wanted to expand it and look at works that are Carnivalesque, arguably, that haven't been explored fully in their Carnivalesque elements before. So my results, these are some of the things that I found out in my research. I found out that depending on who is interpreting the Canterbury Tales, basically which monk composed the order is different. So there's several different official arrangements of the tales, which was important because part of my argument was founded on how the tales interact with each other. So the chronology of the tales was important, even though they don't necessarily directly reference each other, although in some cases they do. I think my argument was that in an abstract way, the content of the tales is generally responding to the other tales around it. So I had to kind of alter that as I went. And again, the book of Leicesters, I leaned on heavily, and he talked about the fairy tales and the pilgrims in the tales as being sort of textual creations that were born out of the tales themselves, and he was kind of turning the general conception of the Canterbury Tales on its head, where the tales are somehow representative of these characters of the pilgrims, and he was saying no, the characters of the pilgrims are actually representative of the tales, that they're born out of the tales themselves. All right, so my time is up. Actually, as I said, I went over. But just quickly, so I drew my conclusions. Again, I put a little picture up just for fun. It's interesting. It's kind of weird and scary. And I just stated my conclusions. So basically, how did in this part, I just took a second to state how my starting out point, my original hypothesis, how did that meet up with my conclusions of research? And I maintained that my starting assertion was valid, that the Canterbury Tales are a Carnivalesque text and are organized around Carnivalesque principles. But there were other elements of Carnival that I hadn't considered, especially the importance of the mask in Carnival. And I sort of latched onto that in the process of doing research, and my initial argument changed, where my argument became very much founded on the idea of the tales as masks, that Chaucer, as the overarching narrator, would don the mask. He would assume the mask of the tales and sort of become a new character, which is how each of the pilgrims came about, that they were born out of Chaucer wearing the mask of the tales, and through that alteration of himself as the narrator, these other textual beings came about, were born. So this picture is also kind of a nice illustration of that, in that you have a plethora of masks of different characters. So you could kind of visualize that as Chaucer donning all these masks, being symbolic of the different stories, and Chaucer as narrator putting them on and becoming different characters. And then finally, I just had my future recommendations. How this theory of Carnivalesque masking be applied to other texts? So basically, with this last part, the whole point is just to think about what more research can be done, what farther arguments can be made. How can what I've done in this paper be built upon, not only by others, but by me for future projects, for future research that I want to do, future work that I want to do. And yeah, you should do the same. Think about how you can build on what you've done with this paper and how it might serve you in future classes and just going forward in life. I mean, ideally, you've picked a topic that interests you and it's something that you're not just going to forget about by May 20th. So, yeah, let me know if you have questions, and you will have questions to answer in response to each person's presentation. My video now is going over time, so I'm going to wrap it up. But yeah, stay in touch, stay healthy, stay happy, etc., etc., etc.